Think about this. Right now, everything that makes you who you are, the smell of your childhood home, the warmth of a hand you haven't held in decades, the very shape of your personality, is floating in a dark, wet, silent space inside your skull. It is written in nothing but tiny sparks of electricity and whispers of salt. The human brain lives in absolute darkness. It has never seen light, never heard a sound, and never actually felt a physical touch. Yet, inside this 3-pound landscape of gray and white matter, it builds a whole, vibrant, multi-dimensional world of past experiences. We go through life assuming our memories are like monuments carved in stone. But the biological reality is much more fragile. And a lot more haunting. Our past does not live in some locked vault. It is a living, breathing thing, constantly being written, erased, and rewritten by a quiet, subconscious architect inside our own heads. To get a sense of how a moment actually becomes a permanent part of who you are, we have to look at the messy, chaotic instant it is born. Neuroscientists call this process encoding. Every single second you are awake, your senses are hit with a massive, overwhelming wave of information. The sound of dry leaves scraping the pavement, the temperature of the air, the faint smell of old paper, the flicker of a distant light. If your brain tried to record every single detail, it would burn out under the sheer weight of the data. So, your senses act like translators. They turn the physical chaos of the outside world into a language the brain can actually understand, electrical signals. This raw data rushes up neural pathways to a tiny, seahorse-shaped structure deep inside your brain called the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as the brain's main editor. It is a gatekeeper, and it has to make a massive, split-second decision: what do we keep, and what gets thrown away into the dark? And this is where the mystery of who we are gets really strange. Why does your mind permanently save the random color of a stranger's jacket from 10 years ago, but completely forget the name of the person you were introduced to just 5 seconds ago? This selective filter is our best defense mechanism, but it is also one of our deepest mysteries, holding clues to how we construct our reality. If you want to keep exploring these quiet, hidden layers of the human mind, take a second to subscribe to the Minecraft and like this video. We are mapping the deepest corners of human biology together, and having you here means you will be part of the journey as we go deeper. Because even now, as your brain decides whether to keep this exact sentence, a chaotic physical transition is happening, one that determines whether a fleeting thought hardens into a permanent part of your biology, or vanishes forever. We call this transition consolidation. It is the process where fragile, short-term impressions get forged into lasting physical structures. When the hippocampus decides something is important, usually because it is tied to a strong emotion like fear, joy, or surprise, it starts a complex biochemical chain reaction. On a microscopic level, memories are not stored in individual brain cells. They live in the spaces between them, the synapses. When you experience something, specific neurons fire together in a precise pattern. If they fire together often enough, or with enough emotional weight, the physical connection between them actually gets stronger. The tiny gaps between these cells physically change shape. Receptor proteins multiply, and chemical messengers flow more easily. Neuroscientists call this long-term potentiation. Your brain is literally sculpting itself, rewriting its own physical map to make room for a ghost of the past. But early on, this new memory trace is incredibly vulnerable. It is like wet cement. The slightest bump can wipe it out completely. The real magic of making it permanent happens when we drift off into the deep silence of sleep. When your conscious mind shuts down, your brain does not actually rest. Instead, the hippocampus begins to replay the day's events on a fast, repetitive loop, firing those exact same neural patterns over and over. It is whispering these stories to the neocortex, the vast, wrinkled outer layer of your brain. During this overnight conversation, the memory slowly moves from the temporary, fragile storage of the hippocampus to the permanent archive of the neocortex. By the time you wake up, the cement has started to dry. The memory is no longer just an electrical whisper, it has become a physical part of your brain's anatomy. But this archive is not laid out the way you might expect. There is no central library in your head, no neat folders labeled with your childhood memories. Instead, your mind scatters your past across a highly fragmented network. Take something simple, like a bicycle. The visual shape of the bike is kept in the visual cortex at the back of your brain. The metallic clink of the chain is stored in the auditory cortex near your ears. The muscle memory of how to balance on the pedals is locked in the cerebellum and motor strip. The feeling of pure freedom you felt riding it is held in the amygdala. So when you sit back and remember that bicycle, your brain is not pulling a complete file out of a cabinet. It is doing a beautiful piece of neural archaeology. It fires an electrical signal that races across all these scattered regions, grabbing the visual, the sound, the movement, and the feeling, and stitching them together in a fraction of a second to create a single, seamless mental picture. This means remembering is not like pressing play on a video. It is an active act of creation. Every time you recall a memory, you are not looking at an old photo, you are building a jigsaw puzzle from scratch. And here is the most terrifying truth of human memory: the puzzle pieces can change. Every time we pull up a memory, we bring it back into that fragile, soft state it was in when it first happened. While that memory is active in your mind, it is incredibly easy to change. If you are in a different mood, if someone asks you a leading question, or if you have simply learned new things since then, those new details can slip right into the old memory. When your brain goes to save it back down, a process called reconsolidation, it overwrites the original file with the updated version. You do not actually remember your childhood. You remember the last time you thought about it. Over decades, this constant cycle of remembering and rewriting can distort our memories so much that we can end up vividly remembering things that never actually happened, with absolute, unshakable certainty. We are, quite literally, unreliable narrators of our own lives. This vulnerability gets even more fascinating when we look at why we forget. We usually think of forgetting as a system failure, some kind of biological glitch. But scientists are realizing that active forgetting is actually essential for a healthy brain. Just like your brain has to filter out background noise when it first takes in information, it also has to clean out its storage over time to keep running smoothly. If you remembered every single detail of every single day, your mind would be so cluttered with useless noise that you would not be able to make decisions, generalize, or see patterns. Forgetting is the brain's way of sweeping away the dead leaves so the paths to what actually matters stay clear. Tiny enzymes and signaling molecules are constantly at work, quietly dismantling the connections of memories we haven't used in years. But sometimes, this delicate balance breaks down. In conditions like Alzheimer's, the physical scaffolding of memory is slowly destroyed. Toxic proteins build up, cutting off neurons and breaking the synaptic connections holding our past together. The tragedy of dementia is not just that the memories are gone, but that the very machine that retrieves them is falling apart. The person is still there, but the thread connecting their past to their present is slowly, relentlessly untangling. On the other end of the spectrum, we see things like post-traumatic stress disorder, where the brain gets stuck in a loop of hyperretention. During a trauma, the amygdala floods the system with stress chemicals, burning the details of the events so deeply into the brain tissue that the memory becomes resistant to the softening effects of time. The memory does not feel like the past anymore, it feels like an ongoing, terrifying present. In the end, we are beautiful, fragile creatures, shaped by a biological ledger that is constantly being written in the dark. Our joy, our grief, our wisdom, and our regrets do not exist in the physical world. They exist as passing patterns of light and chemical currents, whispering across a vast inner universe of 86 billion neurons. We are the architects of this landscape, but we are also its prisoners, bound to the quiet whims of a 3-pound world that decides, moment by moment, who we are, who we were, and who we will eventually